What if I told you that something you use every single day was perfected by Muslim scholars over 1,000 years ago? What if the systems that shape your modern life, timekeeping, hospitals, education, even the camera, were not born in the modern West, but in the heart of Islamic civilization? Why were Muslims once the world's leaders in science, medicine, and innovation? And more importantly, why is this part of history rarely talked about today? Islam did not see knowledge as optional. It made seeking knowledge an act of worship. Muslim scholars didn't study the world to dominate it. They studied it to understand Allah's signs. From homes to hospitals, from classrooms to laboratories, Islamic civilization quietly shaped the foundation of the modern world. This is not a story of pride. It's a reminder of what happens when faith and knowledge walk together. Islam did not treat knowledge as a luxury reserved for elites, nor as a tool only for worldly gain. From the very beginning, the message of Islam reshaped how humans understood learning. Knowledge was framed as a sacred responsibility, a path to recognizing truth, justice, and the signs of Allah scattered throughout creation. The very first revelation emphasized reading, reflection, and awareness, setting a foundation that learning is inseparable from faith. This mindset transformed ordinary study into worship. When a believer sought knowledge with sincerity, it was not merely intellectual curiosity, it was devotion. Understanding the world became a way to understand one's Creator. This is why early Muslim societies produced scholars who excelled not only in religious sciences, but also in medicine, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and philosophy. They believed that ignoring the study of the world was a form of ingratitude, because creation itself is a sign meant to be observed and understood. In Islamic civilization, the pursuit of knowledge was deeply moral. Learning was tied to responsibility. Knowledge without ethics was considered dangerous, while ethics without knowledge was considered incomplete. Scholars emphasized intention before education, reminding students that learning should serve humanity, not ego. This balance created a culture where research was conducted with humility and accountability. Teachers were honored, students were respected, and institutions were built not for profit, but for service. Mosques became centers of education, libraries became public spaces, and learning was accessible to rich and poor alike. This spiritual framework pushed scholars to ask meaningful questions about health, time, space, and society, not to control nature, but to live in harmony with it. Because seeking knowledge was seen as worship, Muslim scholars felt a sense of urgency. They traveled vast distances to learn, translate, and preserve knowledge from different civilizations. Instead of rejecting outside ideas, they examined them carefully, corrected errors, and improved upon them. This openness was rooted in confidence, not inferiority. Islam taught that truth belongs to Allah alone, and wisdom can be found wherever sincere effort exists. This belief turned Muslim societies into global centers of learning, where ideas flowed freely across cultures and languages. The result was not imitation, but innovation grounded in faith. This mindset naturally led to practical contributions that still shape daily life today. When Muslims studied medicine, it was not only to cure disease, but to preserve life, which Islam considers sacred. Hospitals were designed as institutions of mercy, offering free treatment, separate wards, trained staff, and ethical guidelines for care. Doctors were held to strict moral standards, emphasizing compassion, consent, and accountability. These principles later became the backbone of modern medical ethics, though their origins are rarely acknowledged. The goal was not experimentation on people, but healing them with dignity. In mathematics, the need to organize inheritance laws, trade, prayer times, and calendars pushed scholars to develop advanced systems of calculation. Precision became essential, not optional. This led to methods that simplified complex problems and made calculation accessible to wider society. These systems quietly entered global use, shaping commerce, engineering, and education. Even today, modern problem solving relies on foundations laid during this period of Islamic scholarship. Timekeeping is another area where daily life was transformed. Muslims needed accurate methods to determine prayer times, fasting, and navigation. This spiritual need drove scientific advancement. Instruments were refined, astronomical observations were recorded, and mathematical models were improved. The outcome was a deeper understanding of time and space that benefited travelers, merchants, and scholars alike. Modern clocks, calendars, and navigation systems owe much to this pursuit of precision rooted in worship. Even the way humans see and record the world was influenced by Muslim scholars who studied light, vision, and perception. Their work laid the groundwork for understanding how the eye functions and how images can be captured. This research, driven by curiosity about Allah's creation, eventually contributed to technologies that define modern life, from cameras to optics. What began as reflection on how humans see the world became a revolution in how the world is documented. The second keynote reveals a powerful truth. Muslim innovations were not accidental. They were the natural outcome of a world where faith encouraged thinking, questioning, and building. Islam did not separate religion from daily life, so its influence appeared everywhere. In homes, markets, hospitals, schools, and streets. Cleanliness routines influenced public health. Ethical business principles shaped trade systems. Educational methods emphasized memorization alongside understanding, ensuring knowledge was preserved and applied wisely. These contributions were not made for recognition or dominance. Many scholars worked anonymously, believing reward came from Allah alone. Their focus was service, not fame. This is one reason their names faded while their ideas endured. Modern society benefits from systems whose roots are rarely discussed, yet they continue to function because they were built on strong moral and intellectual foundations. Understanding this legacy is not about living in the past or claiming superiority. It is about realizing what becomes possible when belief inspires action, when knowledge is pursued with humility, discipline, and purpose. It transforms civilizations. The same faith that taught prayer also taught planning. The same religion that emphasized spirituality also demanded excellence in worldly affairs. This balance is the true legacy of Islamic civilization, and it offers a timeless lesson for any society seeking progress with meaning. In Islam, the establishment of hospitals and the development of medical ethics were revolutionary concepts that reflected both a deep understanding of human dignity and a commitment to service. Unlike in many other civilizations of the time, healthcare was seen as a communal responsibility and not merely a personal privilege. Muslim scholars and leaders understood that preserving life and alleviating suffering were acts of worship, and they structured healthcare systems accordingly. Hospitals were not merely treatment centers. They were comprehensive institutions that provided education, research, and social support. Separate wards for men and women, specialized care for different diseases, and organized pharmacy services were developed long before similar systems appeared in Europe. Every patient was treated with respect and compassion, and the ethical treatment of patients was codified in guidelines that emphasized consent, privacy, and professional integrity. Physicians were not just technical experts, they were moral agents accountable to both society and God. This ethical framework ensured that medical knowledge served humanity rather than power or profit, creating a foundation that modern medicine would later build upon. These innovations were motivated not by prestige but by faith, and they demonstrate how religious principles can directly shape societal well-being. Alongside hospitals, timekeeping, mathematics, and order played a critical role in shaping civilization. Islam required precise timing for prayers, fasting, and rituals, and this spiritual necessity inspired rigorous observation and mathematical calculation, lunar months, and predict seasonal changes. Instruments such as astrolabes and sundials were refined to an extraordinary degree, allowing accurate determination of prayer times and navigation across vast distances. Mathematics was not just an abstract pursuit, it had practical applications in architecture, inheritance laws, commerce, and astronomy. These developments created a structured society where civic life, worship, and scientific inquiry were intertwined. Accuracy, measurement, and accountability were not optional. They were ethical imperatives. The desire to organize daily life according to religious principles led to innovations that extended far beyond ritual practice. Trade routes became more reliable, educational institutions more systematic, and governance more precise. In essence, the spiritual demand for order became a catalyst for intellectual rigor. Muslim scholars combined observation, calculation, and ethical reasoning to develop systems that balanced societal needs with spiritual obligations. This integration of faith, knowledge, and practice created conditions in which innovation thrived and laid the groundwork for future advancements in multiple disciplines. Islamic teachings on balance and ethics also influenced how these innovations were applied. Scholars were encouraged to reflect on the broader consequences of their discoveries, ensuring that knowledge was never used to harm or exploit others. Ethical reasoning guided medical practice, scientific observation, and technological development. Innovations were meant to improve life and society, consistent with the Quranic principle that all good should benefit humanity. This moral compass distinguished Islamic contributions from purely utilitarian or opportunistic approaches seen elsewhere. Knowledge was valuable only when aligned with ethical and spiritual purpose. The combination of practical skill and moral responsibility ensured that early hospitals were safe, well-managed, and educational centers, while timekeeping and mathematics enhanced both daily life and the pursuit of truth. Scientific inquiry was inseparable from ethics, and technological innovation was inseparable from reflection on divine sign. This created a society where human well-being, intellectual growth, and spiritual fulfillment were mutually reinforcing, demonstrating that civilization reaches its highest potential when faith and reason work in harmony. The impact of these contributions continues to shape the modern world. Hospitals modeled on early Islamic institutions became the template for public healthcare systems in Europe centuries later. Principles of medical ethics, patient care, and hygiene that were codified in Islamic texts were later rediscovered in Western medical literature. Timekeeping and mathematical models developed to serve religious practices laid the foundations for modern astronomy, navigation, and engineering. The early integration of science, ethics, and social responsibility in Muslim societies allowed knowledge to flourish in a sustainable, human-centered way. It is remarkable that these advances occurred at a time when much of the world was fragmented, unorganized, and unaware of systematic scientific methodology. Faith, driven curiosity, and ethical rigor created conditions that made sustainable innovation possible, ensuring that scientific progress served people rather than undermining them. The combination of hospitals, medical ethics, timekeeping, and mathematics illustrates a pattern. When spiritual principles guide human effort, the results are transformative, enduring, and profoundly beneficial for society. Islamic teachings placed extraordinary emphasis on understanding the natural world and the principles behind human perception, laying the foundations for later scientific discoveries in optics, astronomy, and other observational sciences. Muslim scholars approached nature not as something separate from spirituality, but as a series of signs pointing to the Creator's wisdom. Observing the sky, the growth of plants, the flow of water, and the behavior of light was considered an act of reflection and devotion. This perspective encouraged careful study, systematic measurement, and ethical application of knowledge. Pioneers like Ibn al-Haytham, known in the West as al-Hazm, investigated the behavior of light and vision centuries before modern optics. His experiments with lenses, mirrors, and the physiology of the eye were conducted methodically, demonstrating the value of observation, experimentation, and logical reasoning. Islam encouraged this approach because seeking to understand creation was itself a way to appreciate divine wisdom. Knowledge gained through observation was therefore inseparable from humility, ethical responsibility, and spiritual awareness. Scholars meticulously documented their findings, shared insights, and built upon each other's work, creating a cumulative tradition of discovery. The ethical dimension was central. Science was pursued to serve humanity, preserve life, and maintain harmony with the natural order, not for fame or exploitation. By studying how the eye perceives light, humans not only unlock practical applications for medicine and optics, but also develop a mindset that combined empirical inquiry with moral reflection, demonstrating that faith and reason were complementary. Alongside observation, Islamic civilization fostered the confirmation of knowledge through practical application, long before empirical science formalized its methods. Scholars were encouraged to test ideas, make predictions, and refine understanding through reflection on evidence and outcomes. This approach was applied in medicine, astronomy, engineering, and daily life. For example, astronomers developed precise calendars and instruments to determine prayer times, fasting periods, and navigation routes. The study of optics improved understanding of human vision and influenced architecture, ensuring that spaces were designed to make the most of natural light. Mathematics underpinned both practical problem solving and theoretical inquiry, from inheritance laws to architectural design. By observing patterns in nature, scholars were able to predict, measure, and model phenomena, creating a robust system of knowledge that was both practical and deeply ethical. Each discovery was framed within a moral and spiritual context. Understanding light, for instance, was not simply technical. It was also a way to witness the intricacy and order of creation. This integration of observation, ethics, and purpose set Islamic scholarship apart from other civilizations and ensured that knowledge was used responsibly, contributing to the well-being of society as a whole. Modern scientific principles, from experimental methodology to systematic observation, echo the approaches pioneered by Muslim scholars centuries ago. The sixth keynote emphasizes the enduring impact of this knowledge and the lesson it teaches about the relationship between faith and reason. Islamic teachings never required believers to choose between spirituality and intellectual inquiry. Rather, they presented learning as a moral and spiritual duty. Observing nature, experimenting with light, and exploring mathematical principles were all ways of fulfilling this duty. By framing science as a tool for understanding creation and serving humanity, Islam created a tradition in which innovation was guided by ethics, humility, and purpose. Discoveries in optics, astronomy, and other sciences were therefore not isolated achievements, but part of a coherent worldview that valued truth, responsibility, and reflection. The scholar's dedication to ethical observation and practical application ensured that knowledge advanced civilization sustainably. Hospitals, educational institutions, astronomical observatories, and libraries flourished in this context, all grounded in the principle that human effort should align with moral and spiritual guidance. Modern science's rediscovery of many principles first articulated by Muslim scholars underscores the foresight and rigor of these early pioneers. By understanding their methods and motivations, contemporary societies can learn how to integrate ethical purpose with intellectual curiosity, creating knowledge that benefits humanity while honoring both reason and faith. The study of nature, light, and practical application demonstrates that faith can inspire scientific discovery, that observation can reinforce spiritual understanding, and that ethical responsibility can guide technological advancement in a way that elevates civilization rather than exploiting it. If centuries-old Islamic wisdom shaped medicine, science, and innovation long before the modern world recognized it, then the real question is this: what could happen if we reconnect with this knowledge today? The truth isn't lost, it's waiting to inspire, guide, and transform. Don't let history remain forgotten. Fire subscribe now to uncover more hidden Islamic facts that will change the way you see the world.